Well, I got some great positive feedback on my earlier video about fishing with these yo-yos. There were some great questions that were brought up, and I'd like to answer those. Brought up some great points. But before I do that, I'd like to do one thing. When I started, I wanted to make a video that would answer the original question of, are yo-yos something that are viable for me to carry in my bag or my pack or useful in a survival situation? I didn't really cover that very good, so I'd like to go over that real quick right now. These are great, obviously, for fishing. They're also great for snares. Now, I'm not a trapper, and I don't snare. There's some other videos out there that cover that, and so I'm not going to really get into detail. Watch some of those videos. Some of those guys are really good at setting up, catching small game. But I will say that if I was in an upland situation and I didn't have a body of water to use these for fishing with, I could see where they would be a great snare. The two hard things, from what I understand about trapping, is the spring mechanism and the trigger mechanism, that you have both of those right here incorporated in this one small light tool. So I could see where you could make an excellent snare with this, with looping it around or using some leader wire or something like that, and being able to properly set it up. I could see where this wouldn't be catching fish, but it would be catching a rabbit or a bird or a squirrel or something like that. So yeah, great for a dual purpose tool, and that's what we're all looking for in our survival situations, is things that will serve more than one purpose, a tool that will serve more than one purpose. Now, as far as fishing with these in a survival situation, I know I covered this with fishing out of a boat and having a bunch of these out and using your spotlight. You're not going to have that luxury in a survival situation, but they're also useful for fishing off the bank. And you're just going to have to use your imagination a little bit with, how can I get this out to where it's fishing for me and I can go do other things? Cut some poles, cut some cane, find a sapling on the bank that you can maybe trim, or put a piece of paracord on where you can tie this onto and then pull that sapling out over the waters, the bank's edge, and get it out where the fish are going to be feeding. Put it over a deep bank. Put a log out there, tie this to that, and that way you've got this, and it's fishing for you, and you're doing what you need to do back at your survival camp, whether it be building a shelter, a fire, gathering firewood. This is fishing for you. So as far as that aspect, to answer the question, do I think it's a good survival tool to have? Yes. If I can snare with it, great. If I can fish with it, great. There's a lot of good aspects with you use your imagination in a survival situation that these could come in handy with. Now, getting to the question, we've got a lot of great questions. I'd like to go over them real quick. The first one is, I was asked, what brand do I use? Is there one better than the other? I don't really know, and I can't give you an honest answer to that. The only brand that I've ever used is called a White's Auto Fisher. Now, the reason I use White's Auto Fisher is because that's what's sold here locally. My local bait shop sells White Auto Fishers, and I've gotten years of service out of them. They've always worked for me. Where to buy them? Well, I did a search on them today on the internet. Cabela's no longer carries any kind of yo-yo. They don't sell them, so that's out. But you can type in fishing with yo-yos, or yo-yo fishing equipment, something like that. It will take you to Amazon. There's several good suppliers there that sell not only these White Auto Fishers, but some other brands, and I'm sure they're adequate. But I personally can't vouch for them because I've never used them. So that's where you can buy them. That's the brand that I use, and they all are pretty similar in the way they work. So I'm sure that the other brands will probably work. But I know that White Auto Fishers are what I use, and they're great. Another good question that was brought up by a guy down in the coastal area was, would these be effective or useful in saltwater or brackish water? Well, personally, I have no experience. I've never fished with these in saltwater or brackish water, but I have fished on the Gulf, and I would think that you would use normal, like we use our normal fishing tackle, when you get back to the dock or you get back to the pier, then you rinse everything down with fresh water and dry it out. These will be the same way. I think that if you brought these back and rinsed everything off in fresh water, that you would eliminate a lot of your corrosion problem. Hang them up in this bucket system that I told you about in the earlier video. They're going to dry out quickly and they're not going to corrode or rust. Now, as far as what they're made out of and used in salt water, the body of these is made out of galvanized stamped steel. And the spring on the inside is made out of that black, blue colored spring steel. They will rust, the springs will, and this will corrode. It will get that white chalk on them. And then they won't turn right. They'll stick on you. Now, if you don't take care of them and you leave them in the boat, they're going to look like this. And they're going to be all rusty, and they're just going to freewheel, and they won't be any good. So I think if you just take care of them, put them in the bucket, let them dry, rinse them off with fresh water, you'll get years of service out of them. Another good question that was brought up was, how deep do I want this into the water or over the water? Well, I don't ever want my yo-yo to be in the water. I want the yo-yo to be out of the water. Reason being, I want to be able to look out there and I want to see that reflective tape or this shiny metal, and I want to see it wiggling when I've got a fish on there. I'll know to go to that yo-yo first because that's the one that's got a fish on it. If this is down in the water, I can't see that. And I'm going to lose yo-yos because I can't remember where each one of them is set out at. So I want this out of the water. The other thing is, it doesn't really matter how high this is over the water surface, but the big concern is how deep you're going to put your bait. You want the bait at the depth of where your fish are going to be feeding at. So this is not of a concern. Make sure it's out of the water where it's visible and you can see it and you can keep an eye on it. And this is your main concern about how deep, where are the fish feeding, where are they going to be at. Now, as far as bait, use normal baits. Use whatever you would normally use. I've seen guys catch great fish using jigs. I'm not a jig fisherman. I don't know anything about fishing with jigs. Some guys are great with them. I fish my crappie with minnow. If you're going to fish for brim or perch, I would suggest some red worms or some cricket, maybe some beetles, something like that. If you're going to go with these for for catfish, you're going to want to put this all the way to the bottom, maybe swap this out with a treble hook and put a weight on it. Fish those on the bottom with your favorite catfish bait. Some stink bait, some chicken livers, whatever you got as far as what your favorite cat. Use the same bait that you would for whatever kind of fish. The thing is, this is going to be catching fish for you while you're out doing other things. So those are a couple points as far as the survival that I wanted to cover, and if they're useful to put in your pack, and as far as whether they were viable in salt water, which I think they are if you take care of your equipment, and as far as what brand I use, where to get them, and as far as what height I should put them at. But listen, guys, if you've got any other questions or want to know anything else more about yo-yos, we'll cover that. And the next one I'm going to come up with is we're going to go in the same bucket, and I'm going to show you how my trot line system works. So let me know about your questions. If you want to know more about yo-yos, we'll answer those questions. I'll make another video if I want to about doing some more with these yo-yos. Next, we're going to go on to trot lines.